All right, everyone, thank you for coming. This is going to be a walkthrough of the Green Hat tool. My name is John Gaughan. I am by no means a Green Hat expert, so I'm very excited to have Davin Walker here today, who's the creator of Green Hat. I mentioned this before the recording started, but if I start saying anything that's not true, please feel free to interject and correct, and I may ask you a clarifying question here and there.
Sounds good.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So I just want to start by quickly going over the history about, and then we'll jump in. So Davin created Green Hat in 2021, and Davin, if I understand, you're still the principal maintainer on the project. Is that right?
Yep, getting a lot of merge requests, but mostly me
Love it.
as far as new things.
Yeah. Well, we first of all got to start off say thank you for creating this thing and keeping it going because it's certainly been a powerful tool, and hopefully this will help more people have a chance to use it. So in terms of what Green Hat is, if we look at the project, there is very simple description. It's a parser for GitLabSOS files or SOS files in general that can be include KubeSOS, although I think there's more limited functionality there, but also individual log parser for GitLab. The primary use that I put it to certainly is when I get GitLab tar files, or GitLabSOS tar files rather. It's great for analyzing those. So to learn a little bit more about it, one of the primary things to know about Green Hat is that it is documented internally in the tool itself. So we'll start. Typically, you include an argument when you open Green Hat, but we will open it by itself for now. And type about, you can learn a little bit more about what it is. Like I mentioned, it is good for analyzing SOS reports, and you can run commands and find stuff. This includes just some general tips of where to get started, and we'll dive into that a little bit later. But it is a support utility for enhancing analysis of those reports and log files, and includes both commands and whole submodules that you can go into. So we'll explore both of those. Let's see. A note about, just for the sake of posterity, we are on version Green Hat 0.7.3, which is the latest as of March 2024 when this recording is being done. And we're also starting from the point assuming that you have Green Hat downloaded and working on your computer. So if you have questions or problems with that, we're not going to touch on that today. So I'm going to exit out of this again and talk for a minute about just valid arguments when you're starting up Green Hat. So I'm in a directory that has a couple of GitLabSOS files, and these right here. And so valid arguments include GitLabSOS tarballs. A really nice thing, and I really want to emphasize this, is that you can start Green Hat with several at once. And what this allows you to do is, let's say that you are dealing with a ticket with a multi-node Omnibus, or customer has captured GitLabSOS multiple times on the same server over a period of time, so you can compare the logs. This allows you to compare all of those GitLabSOS files or tarballs in the same place with a single command. And obviously that can be really powerful, especially when you're dealing with, those tickets where you have 7 or 8 SOS files that you have to go through. This can be a really nice place to work with those. So you can also do individual files, like I mentioned. There's also something called load local. This is just a quick side note, but it's cool. If you open Green Hat without any arguments and you look at the list of commands, one of them is load local. And what that allows you to do is, if you're running Green Hat on a server that is running GitLab, I'll just show you real quick. You can run this and it will actually just gather the log files from the instance that you're on. And I just want to make sure, Davin, that is what that feature is for, right? I haven't actually used it myself.
Yeah. So 2 seconds of context. I don't know how much history you want me to go through with each of these, but with my test instance, like what I always did for reproducing customer issues is I would just tail the logs and then hope to capture it. That got really old really fast. And so I integrated this into Green Hat so I could reproduce something, load local, query for it with the same syntax, and then not have to like individually open files and stuff like that. See correlation log ID and stuff like that.
Yeah, perfect. That's a great use case. I'm glad it's there. So anyway, you can do this with individual SOS files. For this particular tutorial, we're going to load it with multiple so that we can see the capability there. So all you have to do is I have the files in this, I have the tar archives in this directory, so I'm just going to load them here. And these are both from the same Omnibus server, just taken on different dates, one in March and one in February. Oops. So the first step is to use the actual command name. Okay, there we go. And just a heads up, when you're initially opening Green Hat, you might see a warning about it'll list a file name and then give you these options of essentially how to parse it. And there will be options like raw and JSON. And don't be scared by that. Basically, Green Hat needs to know how to parse each file. And if GitLabSOS has had some new file added to it or some new report that's generated when the GitLabSOS is run, Green Hat, if you're on an older version of Green Hat that hasn't included that file yet, it just doesn't know how to parse it. Typically, you can just put raw and it'll be okay. If you know for a fact that the file it's listing is JSON, you can put JSON. And there's some other options that you can put as well. But just so you know, if that warning comes up or that prompt comes up when we're opening Green Hat initially.
One additional note on that is whatever you put, it'll keep the history of it. So the next time you open that archive and that same file comes up, it won't prompt you again.
That's true, which is very nice. I appreciate that touch. So like I mentioned, Green Hat has all the documentation internally, so help command is a big friend for you here. So we will start with just the general help on this main page. As you can see, this does list all of the commands and submodules, but also gives you just a quick context. So on these individual submodules, on a lot of them, you can run help and it will give you additional information about those submodules. And this gives you just a couple of example commands within Green Hat. We'll come back to this later, but this is basically where to start when you're using the tool. Just kind of some very helpful commands to use. Notice that there are a couple that are essentially just emulating terminal commands. So you can just cat out ps, df, netstat, free, all that kind of stuff. You can also quiet the output. So you can use quiet or debug mode is available. And I haven't explored this, but there are keyboard shortcuts that you can use. So that can be helpful to jump to the beginning of the line, to the end of a line, etc. Okay. And like I said, we'll look at this a bit more, but when you go into an individual submodule and want to know more about it, for example, we'll go into log. Help command has a lot of really valuable information. So again, I would just reiterate, if you don't know how to use something, it's stressful and you're thinking, where's the documentation? Just type help and it should be there. All right, so in terms of where to start, as we just saw with help, it recommended just running the report command, and I completely agree with that. Report is just a really nice summary of data about the server that GitLab is running on, as well as information about the instance of GitLabSOS running on that server. So I'm going to run that command, but before I do, I just want to note there's report, and that's a command that you run from this top level menu. There's also the reports submodule. If we go into the reports submodule and list the options, one of them is full. Now, if you run full in here, that is the same as running report in the top level. I just wanted to point that out, that those are not different. It's the same thing you're going to get. So when we want to report, it's generating those for us. So as you can see, you'll see this with a lot of the commands. It separates this out based on both of the GitLab SOSs that we included when we opened Green Hat. So this is a really nice overview. Like I said, it just includes information about the OS, the memory, the disk, and then it has information about GitLab versions, including the version of each service within GitLab, which is really nice. There's a place that we're going to delve into this in more depth. It's also nice that it includes just a quick overview of the error count for different services in GitLab. And then, of course, you can compare this across the different nodes, which can be very helpful. Another place I'd like to look, expanding on that little errors count that we saw, is that after running the report command, we are now in the reports submodule. And if you run errors, this gives you a summary and count of the different error messages shown in the different logs. So for example, we can see that this particular GitLab instance had a lot of these keywatcher pub sub receive EOF errors. And something helpful to see is that over time, this was taken on, excuse me, on February 23rd. And the number of those errors dropped down significantly on March 3rd. So this is the kind of comparison you can do, which is really nice. It also includes percentages, which is great, and is divided by services. The other nice thing is that you can filter by service. So for example, you can do errors. Trying to remember, it's just like, Davin, is that the right?
I think it has a dash dash help. I'm actually trying to compare here as well. So that would be the first thing I would do here is errors space dash dash help and just see what the syntax is.
That's right, it's dash dash help for errors. Okay, there we go. Yep. So this is a great example of using the help command. So if we want to just see, for example, Giddly errors, we can type errors filter equals Giddly. And there you have it. So again, this is a really powerful place to just kind of get a sense for the errors.
Just as a note for me on that, one of the first things that I do is just, I'll hit the report full, I'll hit the errors, and then this is great for summary, but it only shows the summary. If you add the dash dash verbose, then you get the full context of the error message. That's not always useful depending on how much errors you have. But that's usually the next place I go if there's actually something specifically I want to look at.
Yeah, perfect. There you go. So you get a lot more detail. The nice thing is too, is the boxes are really nice formatting in terms of just being able to see everything a bit clearer. If you want a more compact version, does raw work in this submodule? Okay, no, so that's just in others, but we
Just
will,
a filter, yeah.
yeah, we'll explore that other places. The other place to get started, and we'll dive into this submodule a bit more, but the log submodule is particularly powerful, and we'll talk about that more later, but it's a really great way that you can slice and dice the logs in all sorts of different ways. But we will come back to that. Okay, so now we'll break it down by when you're in this top menu, there's commands and submodules, and I'm just going to highlight a couple of the commands here. So this section is a mix of things like df that just, emulate what would happen if you run that command in the terminal on the server. So if you run df, you get this output for both SOS tar files or tarballs. So there are just a couple I want to highlight that are unique to GitLab or to Green Hat from this list. So the first is if you want to remember how to navigate more quickly, you can do CLI shortcuts. And that just gives you that little box that you get in the help menu, but by itself. If you'll notice, grep is in here, which is nice. I mean, it's just the grep command, but it means that you have it in the context of Green Hat, so you can use it very easily alongside the other commands. History, to clarify, is not a command history on the server where the SOS was taken. It is a history of the Green Hat commands that you've run. So if we look at history, we can see everything that we've been doing so far today. And then if you clear history, wait, might have gotten that wrong, one sec. History clear. History, nothing's there anymore. I mentioned load local earlier, so there's that as well. There are a couple others that are unique to Green Hat, but I won't go into too much detail about them. You can use pry in here as a command. There's settings. There are a couple different settings that you can set up. I'll let you poke around that by yourself. But that is about it. And the others are just there for you to explore. There's LS, which we've been using a lot of, LL, which is very similar. So that's that. Davin, anything else you'd include about the command section?
It's just a little bit of context. The original idea that I had for Green Hat was to emulate the shell of the host that the SOS report was taken from. So that's where a lot of this like CLI stuff comes from. I've deviated a bit. But all of these submodules, they should all have their own help. They should have different helpful commands within them. So like I use GitLab a fair amount. I used it on an emergency this last week to identify that they never actually restarted after an upgrade. Having that as like something that's specific context wise versus just generally looking through files. So in this case, it was I think services or status that I was like, and these are all formatted in different ways so you can see things. So like architecture, for example, if you were to have like four SOS open, which node is running Sidekick? And this with that emergency for that example, they never restarted their Sidekick nodes. They restarted everything else. So I was like, okay, this is the Sidekick node. This node was never restarted. The runtime is 3 days ago, where they said they ran the upgrade last night. So each of these modules may be a little bit of a learning curve, but the idea was to kind of emulate a shell as if you were on the actual host, and then to isolate information based on those kind of categories.
Perfect. Thank you. That is some really good context, and that's certainly the experience, as it does feel like you're on the host in a lot of ways. So we will go through each of these submodules real quick and just talk about the different capabilities. We won't dive super deep just because, like, for example, logs, there's so many different things you can do. But we will show you the resources of basically where you can look to explore and put together different types of searches and commands. So just kind of as a general rule with submodules, something about the syntax that you use. If you type, I think it's about, you'll see this note that with commands and submodules, you can either run directly from this top level menu, or if you're inside the submodule, you can actually just skip the name of the submodule that you're in. So for example, if I run faststats and I want to do top Italy current sort equals CPU, it'll give me that. And I can just use quit to just type Q to get out of there. And you'll see if I actually go into the faststats module or submodule, then I can skip typing faststats and just do top Italy current, and it'll give you the outcome. So faststats, I'm not going to go into detail about this because faststats is documented. This is basically just incorporating the tool into Green Hat. Unless, Davin, I'm not aware, are there any particular limitations or caveats to know about using faststats in the context of Green Hat?
So the biggest caveat is that Green Hat limits the archive output, so you're always roughly getting something that can be emailed. Faststats often works best when you have the full context of the log file. So like let's say you have a super busy customer environment, it's likely that you're only going to get like 6 hours of context at most. Faststats itself can parse those really, really, really large log files. They're just not going to be included in Green Hat. So it's really good for spot checking. If you're looking for better analysis, I would either get the full log, or I think we actually include it in the SOS reports now. So I would jump over there. So for me, it's just being aware that you're not potentially getting the full picture just based on the truncation of the archive.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, that's great to know. Thank you. All right. Next one, if we look, is disk. This one is pretty simple. If you look, it is just outputs df and free. So you can get this and this. And you can, so this is kind of a cool feature. I mentioned this earlier, but you can actually specify the specific archive that you want to use. So let's say that I only want to look at my archive from March. What's going on there? Oh, DF, that's why. Archive 2024-03. And now it's just showing me the output from that archive. Now this is really nice in context. Like let's say that you have 8 GitLabSOS that you're looking at, and you only want to look at the results from from Gitly. And assuming Gitly is in the name of each of those tarballs, you can basically narrow it down to just get the results for those specific GitLab SOSs. So this is a really nice way that you can load all of them at once, but just specify the ones that you need. And also the archive, as you noticed, is partial match, so it doesn't have to be exact. So that's a really nice feature about it too.
Just to add on a little bit there, in my mind, so like with that example of the sidekick node not being restarted, often I want to just like shotgun see everything that's going on. So it's like, okay, let's look at everything. Okay, this node has errors. Then you can start filtering down on that specific archive. That way you're not parsing, looking through potentially a lot of noise for other instances. So like if this node was out of disk space, I don't care about the other 8 nodes in the HA node. I want to look at this one.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a great point in terms of optimizing what you're looking at. All right, now we'll take a look at log. Like I mentioned, this is probably the most customizable, robust submodule, just in terms of the options that are available. So if you type help here, you will see the options that you can use. So filter is kind of your best friend in this submodule. There's actually a separate filter help that we'll run in a second. But this allows you to take slices or accepts of particular fields. You can specify and or, you can convert things into stats. You can just say only want unique outputs. You can sort by particular fields if you want. So this is just really helpful. Show just prints the selected logs formatted. Search is deprecated. You can save the queries, which is really nice, and you can write your last query result into a local file. You can visualize your last query. Now that's dependent on the type of query that you run. It doesn't work for everything, but it is kind of a cool feature, and we'll at least show you how it would work in theory. And then you can list the available files. So I'll show you that quickly. And if you include A, it will show the whole path and give the entire context there. So if we look at filter help, you'll see there are tons of options here. I'm not going to go through each one. You can read through them, but this is an area where it's really worth just playing around with and seeing what you can do. There's lots of different combinations, like you can just print only available fields for selected files. You can get the total count, duration, start end time for matching entries, etc. You can even, I think this one's kind of cool, you can transform, you can copy a key to another key within the results. So for example, you can do a to integer. So if you want to do like a transform CPU field, you can do that. You can also, for some queries, you might want to change timestamp to time, so that's available as well. You can just check to see if a field exists. You can put limitations on stats, like I only want to see results with higher than 1% frequency or below or equal, etc. So there's a lot of options here. Like I mentioned, I'm not going to go through each and every one of them. By default, when you do the key and value, so for example, you have start and then this here, it is partial matching and case insensitive. You can use, there's notes about this down here. You can use the case and exact params if you want to be case sensitive and if you want an exact search. Otherwise, it will be partial matching and give you kind of some broader results. And note that you can use or to be more inclusive, and there's also the ability to exclude certain results. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like, but you basically use the does not equal operator or greater than or less than. Pipe to shell is experimental. I haven't actually tried that out, but that is nice in the sense that you can, get the outputs from the log filter command and then grep or do other things with it. We're also in a minute here take a look at example queries. See here. Oh, and the other nice thing is obviously you can search specific logs. So I'll show you an example of that here. You can say filter or path equals API. You can specify only want to see this in Sidekick current. And there are no results, but you get the point. Okay. So next, if you just want to get a sense, there are so many options. It's really nice that this is available. You can look at examples and just see different types of things that you can do. So we will look at, for example, if we want to list each unique Sidekick queue namespace that is used on these two nodes, we can do that with this command, and it will exclude specific namespaces that we mention. So I'll run this command to just kind of break down an example of how the flags are used. So this is searching, as you can see, it's just searching in the Sidekick current, and that'll look at for both GitLab SOSs that we've loaded. Slice is just going to return the results of the queue namespace field, and it is only going to return unique results for that field. And it is going to exclude the values Jira Connect and hash storage. So when we run this, we can see the results for both and see which queue namespaces are used. And let's see here. So this is also an opportunity to show what it looks like when you write out your results to a file. So if you find a query that you want to share with the customer or just save for later, you can just type write and it will save the results of the last query. And then you have to just give it a name. So we'll call this Sidekick unique namespaces 2, since I already have one named this. Here you go. And then if this is the directory that I started Green Hat in, you'll see that that's written out here. Okay. And this is where you can use raw. So if we redo the same command and just tag raw to the end, you get a more compressed version of the same results. Okay. Visualize, I ran out of time. I was going to put together an example that would actually show good results, but I will at least show you kind of what happens when you run visualize. So for this command, you run a command, and let's say you want to visualize it. Depending on the structure of the results, this isn't really good for graphing, but if it were, you can type visualize, and this will pop up on your local host, and it will actually show you graphs of frequency and all that stuff, and you can customize interval and all that. Davin, would you mind giving an example or just kind of like explaining more a bit about visualize?
Yeah, so some of this may also be letting me know what you all use a lot, so then I can then improve whatever. I feel like for me, the web component probably could use a little bit more love is what I'm getting at there. But where this comes from and kind of the ideas is, let's say you're trying to identify a problem that's happening over time. That is really hard to see from like a log file perspective, right? You're just going to scroll through, hundreds of API queries. Where if you can graph something like that, you can go, okay, hey, for whatever reason at 2 p.m., every time you've sent in an SOS, there's a million requests that come in from this user. That may be harder to see from a log file. That's really obvious as soon as you get into a graph. So I think this is a little bit of taking inspiration from fast stats like per period and allowing you to see type of data over time. So types of requests, where the requests are coming from, the duration of requests, Sidekick jobs even. So maybe, hey, there's like something that's kicking off a whole bunch of pipelines and bringing their system to a crawl. Stuff like that.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. Great. So that's basically a summary of logs. Like I said, that's definitely an area to just kind of explore and try different things. And there's a learning curve, but a lot you can do once you once you get comfortable with it.
Could I add just a couple of quick tips for logs?
Please, yeah.
Okay, so this is like as far as like where I like live and have spent most time development is in that logs module. So the filter command is the default, so you don't need it. I got really annoyed having to type filter every time. So if you like for example, do sidekick space dash dash total. This is usually where I'll start when I'm looking at, like, let's say there's a legit sidekick issue. Maybe they have something with jobs. This is where I would start. So the file names, like for the log files, are fuzzy. So in this case, you can see we got the sidekick client as well as the sidekick current. You could do the full path if you want to be explicit. But one of the reasons that's cool is there's a lot of times where it's like, I want to grab everything from Rails. A lot of those will have GitLab or production or something like that you can just say, yeah, I do want to actually capture both of these. The reason I brought up total is to kind of compare with what I mentioned about fast stats. You can see when the logs started, how many requests, how long they go. So like, let's say a customer said, hey, I had this issue at this time. This may not have caught it depending on the window of time that this captured. So specifically if I'm trying to capture like an error for something that happened, hey, we ran this merge request and it failed. When did the merge request fail? Give me an SOS. Does the SOS include it? If it doesn't, hey, try to reproduce it and capture the SOS again right after, so we don't miss history. The other thing with log is everything should be tab completable. So for example, if you were to type in sidekick dash current, well, like, yeah, so type and yeah, so tab, so the file names themselves should be, but then do space. What is a good example here? So what I want to show is the actual field filtering. Well, okay, so yeah, so just
There you go. Yeah, so you can do slice.
yeah, so did you do dash dash tab or dash dash s tab?
Dash dash S tab.
Okay, so do just dash dash and then tab that. Okay, so this can get a little bit messy. I think this is fixed in the current version in the merge request that I'm working on like right now. But this, so trying to think of the best way to explain this or find maybe another file. So when you do filters on like the Q namespace or the things like that, I don't memorize where things in these files come from. So when you do dash dash tab, this will show all the fields. So there's a bug in this version where you're not getting proper formatting, and maybe I'll send a screenshot. But like dash dash fields, maybe sidekick like dash dash fields, maybe that'll format it a little bit better. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this is also where I would then go next. So like, let's say, hey, we have a sidekick issue. I don't know what fields exist in these log files. You have all of your options as well as all of the potential fields in the file. And this is context specific. So if you're in Gitly or production.log or something like that, those fields for whatever. So like often you'll start somewhere high level, like, hey, sidekick total, what fields do I want to potentially search for? And then break down a little bit further there. The other one that I want to mention, because I use it all the time, is stats. So if you do stats, so dash dash stats equal to level. Like this is probably like my most used, my favorite one. Let's say I want to jump into a log file and just see at a high level what something is looking like. So from here, it's like, hey, we've got 600 infos, we've got 10 errors. Now I know what kind of breakdown exists in that stats level keyword. You can then start chaining your commands, saying, okay, I want the level of error, and then, okay, how many of these are a request duration of this, or what namespace, or et cetera, et cetera. So that's as generally as like far as workflow goes. I'll generally look for like what timestamp, how much data do I actually have? Do I even have any data? What fields exist that I potentially want to search for based on what issue I'm looking at? What types of data exist in that space? And then start filtering down further from there. There is, as far as like copy pasting to customer, I will often use the table style keyword. So like if you up arrow and then add just space dash dash table, no, I don't remember it, table underscore style, yep, and just hit enter. This should return it in something that's a little bit easier to copy paste. So there's a couple of different table formats. This one doesn't use any Unicode characters. So if you were to do table style equals Unicode, like I don't remember all the options that's in the help again. Just and I think you can change this as well in the settings, but for copy and paste, specifically like, hey customer, I identified this user that is abusing your environment at 1 p.m. Being able to actually copy paste and send that evidence back to the customer is super helpful.
Okay, that was
Anyway, yeah, there's a lot I know here, and like this doesn't touch a whole lot, but that's my workflow generally.
yeah, no, this is super helpful. I didn't know about this, which is this is really powerful. I mean, any of what you just mentioned. So thank you very much for sharing all that. All right, we're running a bit low on time, but I'll quickly go through these last couple submodules that we have. So we'll look at memory quickly.
John, can I just ask a quick question real quick?
Yeah, of course.
If you kind of scroll up where it's a little bit, it'll keep going. Keep going. Right there are the possible fields. How did you get that to pop up?
Oh, that was just doing the dash dash tab. So
Oh, okay.
go back here, log, Italy, dash dash, and then hit tab.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
Dash dash fields will also only give you that as far as output goes. Usually just the autocomplete is easier because you want to just keep going rather than start a new command. Or it'll break. That may be the bug. The next version where some merge request is open for, I did rework some of this output, so that may be a part of that. Anyway, it does work on my current build, so that's why we'll pretend that I'm already super cool and fixed it.
There we go. All right, so in memory, this is just pretty simple. You have free and show, but you know that's there and available as well. Unless does this have any? Is there like a secret menu here that does anything special, Davin? Or
Nope.
okay,
No, some of these modules also exist because they were built into the reports module. So like you'll see those same memory graphs in the full report.
right. Okay, and we also have, let's see, reports, which we've already covered a bit. Oh, sorry, but now in reports at least. So errors we already talked about. Fast stats generates, fast stats reports, which is nice. Full markdown is the same as running report or full, but it's in a markdown format, which I'm assuming, Davin, the reasoning there is that just makes it easier to copy and paste and share.
Yep. Yeah. So I'll have to double check, but it was specifically Zendesk friendly formatting. So the idea would be, hey, I'm going to look at this log file real quick. I just want to dump the full report and paste it into an internal note, etc.
Yeah, beautiful. That's kind of what I figured. Thank you. And then we also have the Gitly and production sidekick duration reports that we can look at. Just give you a little example of what that can be. So that's pretty straightforward here. Just giving you a table. All right. And
real quick, just on the duration, this is based off of the percentile key and the log filter. So you can build some of these yourself if you want to get more specific into different fields and stuff. But that's where this comes from. This is using that percentile log keyword.
okay, very nice. Okay, network. I think network seems to be down at the moment. Haven't had much luck with it. But
Yeah, some of the formatting on these files may have changed. So if that's broken, I can take a look at it.
and then like Devin was mentioning, GitLab is a really helpful one as well. So if you look at services, this gives you similar to what you get when you do. This is the same table that you see in the report, where it gives you the versions for the different services within GitLab. Status gives you the status of the services at the time it was taken. Architecture can be very helpful, as he was pointing out, showing which services are running on which nodes. And version, which just gives you the GitLab version for the node.
I have a question about the version. I noticed when we first start Green Hat, there's a version printed. When you have multiple files, which version is printed?
I think it does just a dot first, as far as I'd
Okay.
have to double check. So there's a couple things, and we can add more there too. But like what was really common was like, hey, I opened up an SOS. I want to confirm what version they're on. And so it's like, well, let's add some of those helpers. So the other one that's in there is if there was a GitLab RB included. So that only works if they ran it like as a local clone on a host that has the sanitizer. But it's like if you know the version and you know that the config file is included, like you just kind of want to know that when you open your SOS report. And if there's other things like that that you would find useful, let me know and I can certainly add them. But
Thank
yeah,
you.
so where this version will give you the breakdown of each archive, I didn't want to spam the opening of your shell, in particular if there's some of the other information. So I think it only grabs the first one.
Thanks, that makes sense.
Interesting, gotcha. Okay, and then the last submodule that we'll go over quickly is cat. If you look at help in here, you can put it in raw, you can filter by archive as we've talked about. You can list the available files, print file names in particular, and do show, which will determine the formatting. So for ls, this can be helpful to include the -a. And then if you do Gitaly, oh. Here. Okay, not sure what's going on. Oh, of course, I started Green Hat without any arguments. That would prevent you from having any output. So you can do things like that. Here's a quick example of show, which just changes the formatting. So if you typed ls nginx, I'm sorry, and just nginx, which is just cat, the contents of any nginx files, that's not super efficient in terms of just what you're looking at. But just as an example, then you get the formatted version if you type show. Okay, that is about all I had. So we have about 15 minutes left for questions, but Davin, I'm sure it was kind of painful listening to me stumble through your your beautiful creation. If there's anything else you'd want to include, just in terms of like general tips or any other important context that you feel is missing, please feel free.
Yeah, so I guess just real quick, I mean, it is really interesting to watch someone else use this because mostly Green Hat came from the I'm struggling to actually troubleshoot issues with this SOS report. Give me something that makes it easier. So this is almost everything here is based off of like, I want to find a problem. I wrote a module to make it easier for me to find that problem next time. If there's anything like that for you guys, for y'all, definitely hit me up. Something confusing. As far as just real quick on cat and log, not everything is formatted. So like, let's say you were to open up a whole bunch of files and you assume raw. those won't show up in the log entry. You still may want to see those. So like, I think DF, for example, that's not formatted JSON that, can be displayed. So that's a little bit of where the relationship of cat and log come from is, hey, there's just often going to be stuff in here that won't be something that can be queried. Log is specifically for everything that is structured that can be queried. And then one other thing that I forgot that I do use all the time is the text filter with log. It's a fuzzy filter search through anything else that you include or chain with your command. So like, and I'm sure we've probably all done this. I often will just grep forever. Just like, yep, I got stuff. It's an emergency ticket. They don't know what's going on. Grep forever. Very much like what I would do if I had an SOS report there is just dash text equals error, and see maybe what comes up and then start filtering, extending on my command from there. But yeah, as far as like quick tips, order of operations, I will generally always start with the report just to get an idea of where things could be, then go into the log, start looking for, filtering down specific things, compare with maybe like the config file or like, hey, I'm getting an NTP error. Let me go look at the NTP cat. Yeah, I probably spend most of my time in log because that's usually where you're trying to find some specific error or identify some specific thing. Anyway, I know I'm rambling a little bit here, but yep,
No,
that's all I got.
That's really valuable. Thank you. Okay, so we have about 5 or 10 minutes left based on how much time people want to spend, but any questions that people would like to field? And I imagine you'll probably want to direct them at Davin, but if you're okay with that, Davin.
Yeah, sure thing.
I have a quick question. Does Green Hat also parses like .s files and that kind of thing, or is just the current?
I don't think it does. I don't think we capture those by default in
No,
the SOS report. You could, so what you, like in my mind, what you would do there is just zcat it into a new file. You don't need to send in an archive to Green Hat. So like, let's say someone just sends you like a CTL out tail or like just a sidekick JSON. You can just pass in those individual files as well.
okay,
So I
but
would zcat it into a file and then pull it in.
got it. All right, thanks. And yeah, Devin, we don't capture by default, but lately I've been forced to use the -- after date, and that captures the .s files. That's all I was just wondering.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sounds like no more questions. I'll go ahead and finish up the recording now.